Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Back in the studio, Dr. Paul. How are you?
All set to go.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's the same old, same old. I'm looking for something new and exciting. So we're going to get the same old stuff, and we're going to make it exciting because we're going to identify it as the same old stuff. We have Fauci back on our list.
Yeah.
And what's he doing? He's flip-flopping.
Yeah.
What's his position today? Well, he was interviewed over the weekend, and I tried to follow it.
Yeah.
But his position in the same statement, there were 2 or 3 positions on there. You know, one time he's for more masks and then less get masks, and then we need more vaccinations, but it's always more government. The one thing that annoyed me the most on this was his bluntness on rights. He more or less said that individual rights don't exist, that you have collective rights. So, and that's basically the problem we have here. It has the problem of patient rights and doctors' rights and who makes these decisions. And unfortunately, the patient hasn't been talked about too much. We talk about the patient, but that's ultimately the real problem here. And it's all done. All this is done is to make everybody healthy and being taken care of. That's the government's responsibility. And of course, once that becomes the goal, they can do everything and anything, because even if everybody were healthy to most people's satisfaction, they would still have to say, but we want to keep you that way. Yeah. What's your diet going to be? How much exercise are you going to get? What are you reading these days? What kind of stories do you read? Do you go to the movies? We don't want you to get upset at all. We're going to have to take care of you. Well, it's almost getting like that, because it's people are very, very frightened. One of the most important things that I found in medicine was getting a good relationship with the patient having confidence in the physician. And in the last 30 or 40 years, that has been steadily undermined. I think what we're reading constantly now is the interference in the doctor-patient relationship. You know, there's a law recently passed that said that you have a right to try some medicines if they are in the training, they're not quite finished with the FDA, didn't give final approval, and the patient has a right to try it, you know, if it's a life-threatening situation. Well, that should be an automatic anytime. Yeah. But I'm sure that law didn't automatically make it comfortable for everybody to use whatever they want for COVID. Yeah. You know, look at what they've done there. But I think that as far as I'm concerned, what I've been reading here, it's more of the same. Sometimes it's worse. But even when we see things that are getting better, yes, there's a variant. Delta variant is out there, but the world's not falling apart. Well, why don't they put the statistics up on the people who were injured or killed over the weekend in the big cities? Yeah. You know, or as a consequence of government action. A lot of problems there, but they're not important enough. We have to deal with terrifying the nation over medical things, because it's real hard to attack a virus they can't see, can't identify, and they have total confusion. And now the Delta virus is not distinguishable, you know, from COVID, and they admit that. They make assumptions. Yeah. There may well be a relationship, but it was even known when the epidemic broke out a year ago. They were never sure. How many times did we report where they weren't doing the test right? Yeah. The PCR after a year, they decided, oh yes, the cycles are not enough cycles for an accurate test. So it's on and on. But the only people I see that are winning are the ones who have a goal of creating chaos and enhancing the power and scope of government. They're doing pretty well, and those are the people we should be challenging.
Yeah, you know, it's been a strange few days since we last met on Thursday, and you know. The first article we're talking about is this interview that Fauci did, and I think we can put it up if we haven't already, but he says more pain and suffering is ahead because of the cases rising, because of the Delta variant. But you and I both identified 3 absolute contradictions in the same article. First of all, more pain and suffering are coming. That sounds dire. But then he said in the same article, but there's not going to be another lockdown because enough people are vaccinated. And then he went on to say, not enough people are vaccinated to control the outbreak. So, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but those are three contradictory statements that are very confusing. And then when we talked before the show, our intent in today's episode is not to say they're all liars and they're all wrong and they're all deceiving us. We're hopefully just representing what the average American thinks right now, which is there's so much contradictory information coming out from the so-called experts that Americans right now have absolutely no idea what's up and what's down and what's going on. It's just pure mayhem and confusion.
And it feeds in to the media, the major media, and the coverage. Without the coverage that we've had to listen to, for the last year or so, I don't think the people would be so frightened, but they are. There's two types. Some, the more they hear it, the more scared they get.
Yeah.
And the other half is the more angry the other ones get because they're sick and tired of it, and they've come to believe, this is a bunch of baloney.
Yeah.
When they go out to these functions and I say, you go there and you're all going to die. And, right now the masks are only important if you go into your house, indoors. And there's no statistical evidence as of now to prove that all of a sudden this variant is more deadly. Matter of fact, I looked and looked. I want to know how many people are dying from this, and you can't find it because they admit the test doesn't really test it.
Yeah.
You can't tell for sure which one you're testing when you're running a test on it. So but it's the propaganda is still pumped out, and the people still become very, very frightened. The politicians are getting rather annoyed too because the people are getting annoyed, and DeSantis is still governor of Florida.
Yeah. Still. And here's the timeline that was so strange. So we talked about this on Thursday because as we did the show, the CDC was saying, okay, we changed our minds. Even if you're vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. And of course, if you talk about problems with, quote, vaccine hesitancy, well, that's certainly going to put it up in spades. Okay, hold on a minute. I got this stuff injected in me, and I still have to put a mask on and do everything else that I had to do without it. So why am I taking the risk? So that was a problem. But the CDC also said on Thursday, well, we have some evidence, we have some new studies, but we're not going to release it. They're internal studies. And so that's what happened first. And then Friday, so-called leak to the Washington Post, I think, it was a study out of Massachusetts where they studied several hundred people that went to an event. And in fact, we could put this up. This is what precipitated the whole freak out over the weekend. CDC study shows that 74% of people infected in Massachusetts' COVID outbreak were fully vaccinated. Now that would be a pretty terrifying headline if you had all the faith in the vaccine, because that would, if that were true, then it would suggest that the vaccine is no good. It doesn't work. And so that was the information that the CDC put out on Friday to back up its decision on masks. Well, then the White House started to freak out about that, and the White House spokesman for COVID attacked the Washington Post for reporting what the CDC itself said, saying that you're not doing it right, pounding his fist on the floor, and they said it's rare that there's breakthroughs, it's rare, and so nobody knows what to do now. Is it rare? Is it common? Does the vaccine work? Does it not work? Should we wear a mask? Do masks work? And so now we're left here on Monday morning with a whirlwind of a weekend and really unbelievably bad messaging coming out of the White House.
More confusion than ever. So if the vaccine really worked, then there would be no need to build up fear, and there'd be no need for somebody now, if you've had the vaccine, you have to put the mask on. But even though you can find studies that support either, both sides, but there's been reports out that if you had so many people come down with it, the people who had the vaccines had just as much infection as the people that didn't have anything.
Yeah.
So there was no evidence that the vaccine really works. But you know what? They try one, they try two. If it doesn't work, try three. And you know what? When there's an increase in demand, you know what happens to a product? Price goes up.
That's right.
Can you believe that they're raising the price of the vaccine?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, they said, well, that's not that has nothing to do with interference in market. It's only the Fed. It prints too much money, which is true. That's part of it. But the truth is also that the demand is very high because maybe if hydroxychloroquine actually was the best drug, it could be when all the dust settled, it could have been the best thing to do. Follow all the health information and taking hydroxychloroquine. But no, they said no, sir. We have to really treat people well and take care of people. They need the vaccine. We need to save lives. We can't mess around with science. Oh, they didn't say that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, then, what they're trying to say is, well, there's breakthroughs because this is a new variant and the vaccine is not protecting against it. But in the same breath, they said that to block this variant, you have to get vaccinated. So if on the one hand, the vaccine doesn't protect against the Delta variant, how could they encourage you to get more vaccination to protect against the Delta variant? I mean, even people of average intelligence are scratching their heads. And other people are wondering, well, maybe this is why we've never had a vaccine for coronaviruses in the past, because they do have a lot of variants and they do tend to change, and it's hard to get your fingers on them,
I saw a liberal defender of all this stuff was asked a decent question about why was it that when they got the why was it where it dropped off sharply, and there were months where they had no reports of the flu, the old-fashioned flu.
Yeah.
And he was asked that question. He said, "Oh, well, that was because of lockdown. They were practicing better health, and because they didn't want to think that, maybe it's a vaccine or something. It depends on what's going on that particular day, on what will fit their scenario or what will fit the emphasis, and to scare the people into lockdown. You'd think they could scare them into getting the vaccine. That's their number one goal, it seems right now. At the same time, they scare them by saying, "Well, you're going to have lockdown if you don't get your vaccination." Well, then they get their vaccination, and then they still scare them.
Yeah.
And they say you better wear your mask.
Yeah.
So it is a lousy system. Only government could have invented this. Some of it is contrived, and there are ulterior motives for this, but some of it is just because bureaucrats come out to be some of the dumbest people around. And they aren't very scientific unless they all studied political science in college, and sometimes that doesn't help too many people.
Yeah. Well, let's look at a couple of clips on this just to drill down a little. Let's look at the next clip. This is the Washington Post. It was kind of unusually, it was in the crossfire of the administration over the weekend. It's usually people like us and Alex Berenson in the crossfire. But this is from Friday. Scientists, this is the Provincetown outbreak that they're talking about in Massachusetts. And this is confusing, and that's why I highlight it. Recent data on breakthrough infections. So the 3/4 of the people infected in Massachusetts were fully vaccinated, as we said. But their take is, it shows that the breakthrough infections make clear that the vaccines do work. Well, it seems like that makes seem like they don't work. And let's look at the next one. So this is the Washington Post reporting from the CDC. Vaccinated people made up 3/4 of those infected in the Massachusetts study, and that's when the White House absolutely flipped out and said, no, that's not the case, even though they were using their own data. Let's look at the next one now, and this is Justin Hart is a statistician, and he's talking about the people in this Massachusetts outbreak, and this is also disturbing. 5 of those people in this were hospitalized, and 4 of those 5 were fully vaccinated. So even the argument that it makes less severe infections is belied by the data itself, showing that 4 out of the 5 had double shots, and I think actually the 5th one had a single round of the shots, and they were the ones in the hospital. So it's confusing.
But they're never embarrassed by this,
Yeah.
and they always come back and they always have an answer, and they can juggle the figures and continue with this process. There was one little item here that I wanted to mention, which is a bit scary, even though some of this has been around for a while, because if you aren't conventional in your medicine, even though you're practicing medicine, there was no injury involved, the patient was happy and the doctor was happy, you can lose your license if you don't follow the allopathic method and you go more natural. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. So, but here it says physicians who post COVID-19 vaccine misinformation may lose license, and the medical planners, the medical societies are telling this to them. And you know what my first reaction is who is the decider? Who decides what is misinformation? That's the whole thing. You know, we hear all this stuff. We repeat it and take our take on it and try to get it away from the politicians. And but who's going to be the judgment? And there always will be a contest. I mentioned the other day, the debate ought to be among the doctors who are looking for the truth.
Yeah,
you know, and have real debates and comparing, you know, the experiments and the research. But no, it turns into a football, and it's the politicians who make this decision. And you can get into so much trouble if you don't go along with it. How many doctors have lost their jobs? Some of our friends, you know, spoke out against it, just to suggest that maybe the government is going in the wrong direction, have lost their jobs on it. Sad.
Well, the thing is, think about this, our hypothetical doctor in May, maybe the day before the CDC says if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. What if the day before he said to a patient, hey, you're vaccinated, you don't need to take the mask, you don't need to wear the mask. He would have been cited for medical misinformation and lost his license, even though the next day the CDC flipped and said they didn't need to wear a mask. So it's, and this is the case all over. In fact, let's look at the next clip, Dr. Paul. This is Walensky from the CDC. She's almost a bigger flip-flopper than Fauci. Here's what she said on the 29th of July. Masks and vaccines could stop the COVID Delta variant spike within 2 weeks. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. But then you wonder, so go to the next one. It would only take 2 weeks. And this is Ian in South Carolina. Well, everyone, it's been 2 weeks since LA County reinstated their mask mandate. Remember, the CDC director said they could stop the variant spike within 2 weeks. It surely must have worked this time, right? And then you look at what it is, and you look at that last line. That's when the masks were reinstated, and it kept going up, up, up. So again, masks failed. She was wrong once again. Medical misinformation.
I think the kids should get to decide. I know we weren't talking about children there, but kids have pretty good instincts too. Parents have a tough time because they can't stand the idea they might deny their kids the right kind of medicine. But you know, the story was out just this weekend in Britain that there was a big argument. A woman delivered a baby, and they came for the baby, and they said, we have to test it for COVID.
Yeah.
And she didn't like that. She felt like that they were taking their baby, a newborn baby, and making a guinea pig out of it, and had a big fight, and it raised the issue of individual rights and personal liberties. But and I think that's one of the biggest issues here. I think it was Fauci. Fauci gets in there. He's an expert on that too.
Yeah,
on,
he's a libertarian.
Personal liberties. You know, he says people who don't wear masks are encroaching on others' individual rights. And Fauci depends. Do CD mask guidance for the vaccinated, as he warns. Sure, he's for that. He says there, if you don't wear them, you're exposing people, and you're going to infect them, and you're killing people, and that sort of thing. And the whole thing is what about the mandates?
Yeah.
How many mandates he's had? He's probably, was responsible for the carrying out of a policy that violated more civil liberties than any one man, short of some militant dictator of some country, because he has become this, sort of, quiescent type of person. He's not the head of state, and yet he gets paid more than the head of state, and he gets paid money, from the special interest. So that's the whole thing. This whole idea that if you don't do their treatment, that you're violating somebody else's liberties. They want to make more money, so you better listen.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. The first time in history that somehow living your normal life would violate someone's liberties if you happen to inadvertently pass a germ onto them. That's never been the case in history. And I wanted to show something related to that, Dr. Paul, which is a grotesque example. But first, just because of the order that I put things in to save our poor fellow back there from having a heart attack, if we could just put up these first two charts, because I just want to talk finally about the Delta variant, because this is the experience in the UK, Dr. Paul. And this are daily new cases, and you can see that spike on the right. It went way up very, very sharply. And at the tip of that is when they got rid of their mask mandates, and it started to drop very, very rapidly. when you look at this huge spike just a few days ago, you would think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. People must be dropping like flies. Well, the good news is if we look at the next clip, the daily deaths from the spike, if you look there on the right, it's virtually nil, a tiny, tiny increase. So it's like all other virologists said, the newer strains are more virulent but less deadly. But skip ahead now because I want to just follow up on what you said, Dr. Paul. If we can put that next one up, this is what you were saying about Fauci. People who don't wear masks are encroaching on others' individual rights, but this to a grotesque level came from Ted Lieu. If you remember him, he's a congressman out of California, big Russiagate conspiracy theorist. Look what he said on this. He tweeted this today. Now, I think this is despicable. You have no right to spread your respiratory droplets on me, on others, in public spaces and in businesses. The majority of reasonable Americans are going to have to fight the tyranny of the minority who insist they can leave their saliva anywhere, and we will win. What I thought was interesting is the juxtaposition, because if you look over, leave that up please for a second. If you look over there, this is his profile on Twitter. It includes husband of Betty, member of Congress, in his last sentence, also, empathy is good. So that's part of his Twitter handle. And on the one hand, on the other hand, he's saying, we're going to attack you. You're running around putting your saliva everywhere. You have no right to be outside if you're sick.
Of course, they're preaching the tyranny of the minority all the time, but they don't realize also that they get their strength by getting tyranny of the majority. And the majority, you get to 51% and then transfer that to those individuals that are in the government, those people who seek power and influence. That's tyrannical too, and the majority can endorse it. It's a tough situation. But of course, in libertarianism, individuals have rights and nobody can initiate violence against anybody else. It sort of settles the problem. Everything is voluntary, socially and economically, and therefore there's less violence. In perfect society, yes, it is true that if you have the flu, you might give it to someplace else. But over the years, most people would protect against, going even to their relatives or traveling, and they would not expose other people. But now it has to be a big political issue to set up the rules and create the problems that you're protecting them against, and then you can do anything you want after that.
And then there's also the whole idea that getting some of these things actually helps your immune system, keep in shape. It's like going to the gym. Your immune system going to the gym. The idea that you should never get them. But we hate to bring up the subject of money. But Dr. Paul, I think you have something.
Yes, and I can't believe this.
It's a shock.
I'm just wondering whether a person like Fauci could be more destructive with language than the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. But the Federal Reserve Board, they're more dignified. And Fauci tries to be, but the issues are so bad. And that is that, they talk back and forth and have different positions, and the positions are wrong. But here it is, the prices are going to go up. There's a high demand. There's a lot of money involved, billions of dollars. And yet there was another article, I don't think we have it on our list to go up, but there was many tens of thousands of doses of the vaccine gets wasted, And you might say, it's better than using it.
Yeah, maybe.
maybe forcing people to take it or intimidate. I think strong intimidation and terrorizing people is a bit of force. It's not quite as bad as if you grab the person and said, "This is what you're going to get." But in a way, it's not voluntarism, because first they had to steal the money to buy the vaccines, and the voluntarism would help a tremendous amount, like which doctors you go to, what advice you're going to take, and what medication you're going to take. But Pfizer and Moderna hike prices for their COVID jabs by up to 25% this is, I guess, in the EU now. But that's a lot, because that's where they're really pushing more these vaccines, the shots over there. But I'm not surprised it went up. It was probably too high to begin with, and especially if there's a controversy, and I believe there is one, on really how absolutely necessary is this to save the world, for everybody to get these shots. But the politician, it'd be interesting, we'll never know the answer to this, it'd be interesting to know that every politician who ever spoke favorably of the vaccine actually got the vaccine.
Yeah.
We know they don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
You know, how many examples have we pointed out there? They say you will be under restrictions on where you go, or you're under lockdown and social distancing and all that. But I just really bet a lot of the would probably be pretty interesting to see Nancy Pelosi ducked it.
Yeah.
But she ducked the rules.
All the time. Even now, her new rule in the House, you have to wear a mask. I think that 3 or 4 times she's been out without the mask.
Oh, she must be disappointed because once again, it was a money issue. Okay, you guys, if you're not going to do it, I have the right to fine you.
Yeah.
They've already done it. They've already fined Thomas.
Yeah, they
Massey. I don't think he's paid yet.
Oh, he's suing her for doing
Yeah,
that.
that's an interesting lawsuit. Isn't it?
Yeah, it is interesting.
But it's an interesting thing that she's fining him
Yeah.
for not wearing her mask.
The thing is, they want to make it look like, you know, if some of the things we say means you're anti-vax. No, it means that there are different levels. They want to make it one size fits all, that everyone has the same level of risk. And that's simply not the case. Objectively, a massively larger amount of people over the age of 85 have died from this disease. People in that area should definitely consider it more than people who are 20 years old and in great health. So we know that risk has changed. But speaking of profits, I know, Dr. Paul, this is filthy lucre, but let's put up this next clip. It's on the same vein as what you were talking about. Pfizer raises COVID-19 vaccine sales estimate 29% to $33.5 billion. Now they're talking about third booster shot every other day, this and that. It's a windfall for these guys, for Big Pharma.
And it might not work.
Yeah, it worked for some people.
Oh, I don't think they could. I don't think they could go past 3. I don't. People will finally wake up.
Maybe.
Well, I don't have any more place where you can shoot.
Yeah,
me
like
here.
a heroin addict.
So you know, one thing that has gone on. We talked about this a month or so ago because there was a picture of the pollution from the mask.
Oh, yeah.
And it was an ocean picture, but that came up again. It must have been a new picture, and it was like 1.8 billion masks in there, and the damage to this wasn't minor.
Yeah.
It was killing fish and the environment, and nothing. It doesn't. None of it is biological. You can't. It's not going to dissolve. It's going to be there for a long time. It's going to be on the beaches, and I imagine it could harbor some infectious organisms. So, and that's that to me is. I wonder why the environmentalists never seem to wake up. Maybe we better weigh this. You know, maybe we're not doing enough good in order for us to have this dirt on the beaches. But they'll have another reason.
Yeah.
Send out the mask police for cleaning up. Find the people who don't turn in their mask. And you're going to have to buy your mask here and return it when you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about what they do.
Makes
I mean, it just causes them to come up with another silly notion of more control. And of course, that's the opposite of what we would like to see. We would like to see people work out their problems. It doesn't mean people are not smart. Matter of fact, I think people have smarter answers when they divorce themselves from the aggressive bureaucrat, the AOCs. Why does the media bow to these individuals? We have to do what they tell us.
Yeah.
You know. There's another way to do things, and that, of course, is what we're here for, is to try to introduce people to the ideas of figuring things out. If you didn't have the government to take care of you, they're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the momentum is on our side. The numbers keep skyrocketing of people who don't trust the government, and they're annoyed by the government, and the government's going broke. So we just need to be ready and to be able to take care of ourselves, because it might not only be a motive to do it, it might be the only option left if they continue to mess up the whole system as they're doing.
Yeah, as they're doing a good job of. Well, the last little mini topic we want to talk about is something that nobody wants to talk about, and that's a little country called Sweden. Why don't we put up that next clip? Mask-free Sweden nears 0 daily COVID deaths, as chief epidemiologist warns against far-reaching conclusions about the Delta strain. As we know, Sweden didn't have mask mandates. They didn't have forced vaccines. They didn't do any of it. They've had Delta variant, they say, careening through the society, but it really hasn't caused a lot of deaths, and we've seen that from the UK. The same thing is the case. And here's something from the article. And while U.S. health authorities are pressing Americans in high transmission areas to mask up, Sweden dropped its last remaining mask recommendation, not mandate, recommendation related to public transport on July 1st. So they are no mask mandates, no nothing, and they've had 0 deaths in most of the country over the past month. So,
and I think the expectations from our side was that they would probably do better economically, and they have.
Yeah,
I mean,
yes.
they have not suffered the consequence. And take a look at the individual states. This is one example of why the principle of states and independence, more so than what we have, makes a difference. People have found out some states are lousy at
Yeah.
providing freedom of choice and prosperity, and people can move. Texas, we're seeing new people
Growing.
down here
Oh,
all
yeah.
the time, and there's certain states that have handled this totally differently. And I would hope they would wake up. Not that we think the Republican Party has the answers to a lot of things that we
Yeah.
worry about, but at least there's a clear difference about how the handling of the COVID thing that existed. They're definitely different, and that is to me an example of why we should continue to compliment the people who are doing this and make sure people, I guess people, they don't need to be we don't have to beat it into their heads. I think it's natural. A lot of people are living in those states they wish they didn't.
Yeah.
How do you keep the job you have, and how are you going to manage? Because those states that have done this, that took away their liberties, guess what? They take away their money too.
Yeah.
Because they have to pay for that liberty that they're providing in the big states.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to close with a few charts because we talk about it a lot, but visualizing it I think really does help. And this is in response to the idea that we need another mask mandate and that we may need some more lockdowns, because Biden warned over the weekend, it's not out of the question, we're going to do more of that. And then, of course, a couple minutes later he says it is out. But anyway, let's look at the next link here. This is Japan. These are examples, if we can make that a little bigger, these are examples of masks not working. If you see there, you see 98% mask compliance toward the end, 96% earlier. The spike in cases continues to grow and fall on its own. Japan just reported 9,500 new cases, its highest daily case number of the pandemic, even though there's a 98% mask compliance. Let's look at the next one. This is Malaysia. It's the same thing. You see 93% mask compliance. It does absolutely nothing to the increase in cases. And in fact, cases in Malaysia are up 145,143% since the mask mandate on August the 1st. It's unbelievable. And let's look at the next one. Probably the most totalitarian state in the world, I think probably worse than North Korea, is Australia. And look at all of these lockdowns. Victoria lockdown, lockdown lifted, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. It's done nothing to change the course of the daily new cases. And you're seeing the most recent one, South Australia lockdown July 20th. It's done nothing to change anything. It's just made lives more miserable. And in Australia, we didn't talk about it today, but they've called out the military to take on people who are violating these absolute lockdowns. It's insane.
What a sad story. I'm gonna. You're finished.
I'm done. Yes,
Oh,
yes.
Okay. I'm gonna just mention once again about the imperfections of the testing. I think most people have heard about how imperfect they are and how many mistakes they made, and they finally admitted they weren't doing the test correctly. So the information, I imagine more than half the information that they've ever used in all this promotion of vaccines and lockdown was inaccurate. And the test, the PCR test, I understand you cannot tell the difference between a variant and COVID. Matter of fact, you can't even prove what COVID is by that test alone. There has to be a lot of inferences from that. So there's so much hype on this, and fortunately, truth is breaking through this all, and a lot of people, didn't get exposed to all the very, very aggressive government activities. Anything from where people were moved to the nursing homes to be taken care of, to being forced to take these vaccine shots, forcing the kids to wear these masks, and it was useless. All of this, and it still goes on and on. But people are waking up, and it's all they have to do is wake up to the cause of liberty and get more confidence that people are smarter and more able to take care of themselves than expecting that deferring that responsibility to the government is better. It isn't. Governments have never proven to be protectors of liberty. They have always proven to, abuse that power. Power, corrupts, and that is what always happens. And the most corrupt people are the ones who like government. They're the ones who put more energy into getting into government, and the people who are more likely to say, well, let people alone. They let people alone, and hopefully they'll go away. And then finally gets out of hand. And right now we're on the verge of this whole thing getting out of hand, and people might have to take a stand on it. And we're seeing that. We're seeing people saying, I'm not going to go through this lockdown again. And even Pelosi had to back down when the congressman said, "You're going to fine us for not wearing a mask and make it pay?" She had to back away from that. Big deal. But no, I think overall there's more people speaking out and tired of it. I don't think it's going to be a free ride for the authoritarians this year as it was last year. There's still going to be a lot of problems, and they're going to make up a lot of stories, but truth is out there, and more people. We still have the ability, by word of mouth, if nothing else, and occasionally a program can and put the message out on the internet. But the truth is out there, it's available, and it should be made available, and let the individuals decide what is right and what is wrong. That, to me, is the most important thing that we can do. Of course, the most important rule or right to have for that is the First Amendment right to say things that you believe in and not be censored by the government or a government agent working for the government. Boy, that is tough, and that keeps expanding. We have to realize that the message is most important, and we should not be tolerant of people censoring other people. We can speak out. We can, confront it by avoiding the use of those instruments that are more willing to censor people and prevent people from speaking out the truth. So it is something that is building, but I still look on the positive side thing. More people are with us now than they were a year ago, and that's good. And I want to thank all of you for being with us today and coming back so often. And please return to the Liberty Report.